Hello and welcome to week 7 of data mining class. Today we're going to talk about artificial neural networks. So here is the plan for today's lecture. Recall that in lecture 2 we learned about parametric models, linear regression and logistic regression. So they are parametric because in both cases we are assuming that the true model has some kind of an explicit formula with some parameters, and in order to train the model, we find the values of parameters that minimize a suitable loss function. This is done by the so-called gradient descent. So we find derivatives of the loss function with respect to the parameters, and then we just start updating these parameters until we reach a minimum. So artificial neural networks are basically trained by the same method, only of course it is going to be much more complex. But the idea is the same. So we are assuming an explicit form that is super complex, but it is still an explicit formula with some parameters, and then we find values of parameters that minimize a suitable loss function. Right? So here are the learning outcomes of today's class. Right? So you need to understand and explain how a fully connected artificial neural network makes its predictions. You need to distinguish parameters versus hyperparameters. You need to explain how to choose the appropriate activation and loss functions. And you need to roughly understand what may go wrong with gradient descent. So in previous years, we also explained how to calculate the gradient, but this year I decided that if you are really interested, then you should just read it by yourselves, because while it is not very hard to explain how to calculate the gradient of the loss function, it still takes about a week. And a question on doing gradient descent by hand is usually the hardest in the exam, in the sense that it probably takes half an hour or maybe 40 minutes to solve it. So which is why I decided not to really go into it this year. But still, you need to understand what gradient descent is and what may go wrong with it.